Hi there, and welcome to another interview. That's a reminder that I shouldn't have had, which is about this interview. Right, okay, start again. Hi there, and welcome to another interview. Today I've got the fabulous Greg with me, and I'm going to start with the same question I ask absolutely everybody. Hey, Greg, why did you become carnivore?
Thanks for having me on your channel. It's great to see you. I'd like to, if I
Good to
can,
see you.
start from the beginning. I'll try not to make it too long, but I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was 15. But prior to that, I had quite a few digestive issues. That when I was at school, I had a lot of problems with my bowels. I used to have to go to the toilet, I think, roughly 15 to 20 times a day. That was about average. I'd have to carry around a little rucksack on my shoulder with a change of clothes and some toilet paper, because there's quite often times where I wouldn't make it. And this became normal for me, really. My friends would often ask me, what's in your rucksack? I'd just tell them it was snacks and drinks and things like that, because it's a bit embarrassing, really. And this went on for quite a while. When I had my official diagnosis, first thing they did was they put me on steroids, which I think is the go-to, really, for autoimmune issues to start with. And that kind of helped, but with that comes side effects. So I got the stereotypical moon face, acne, mood swing, all that kind of stuff going on. So they put me on a series of different trials. One of the ones that sticks out in my mind is that they said that they identified an intestinal worm that they think would help with the symptoms of Crohn's. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll volunteer for that. So I didn't know whether it was the actual worm or a placebo that I was getting. Either way, it didn't make a difference. It didn't help at all. And so I think I exited from that quite early, because I wasn't getting any better. In fact, I was getting worse. And they put me on various different drugs that worked for a short period of time, but then didn't really work. And then I got to my early 20s, and they sort of like run out of options as such as to what they could offer me. So there was basically two options. One was to have an experimental drug that they said had only been tested on mice at this point, but it was showing promising signs in humans, or something along those lines. But this drug contained the DNA of mice. And I was a bit like, I'm not sure I really want to do that. The other option was to have surgery, and that was to remove my large bowel, completely remove it, and my rectum, and I would have what's called an ileostomy. And for some reason, that stuck out in my mind as the thing I wanted to do. I don't really know why, but I was just like, this is what I think I need to do. It felt right at the time. So it's a lot of the operation. So that's what I did. So I had the operation, and they removed my large bowel completely on my rectum. After the operation, the surgeon came to see me, and he says, right, Greg, obviously the operation was successful. One thing we'd like to just tell you, though, is that your large bowel was completely rotten. There's no way that we would have been able to salvage it. He says you've done the right thing. So at that point, I felt a bit more relieved that I had made the right choice at that time. And then after that, the nurse sort of comes and sees you, and she sort of gives you some advice to do, what not to do. Mostly it was just chew thoroughly, drink lots of fluids, and carry on eating whatever you want, basically, just as long as you chew thoroughly. To watch out for dehydration, so drink lots of sports drinks, is what they said, which we know is really not very good. But at the time I didn't know, so I just followed their advice, and that's what I did. So I left hospital, and I ended up going back 3 or 4 times after that, because I kept getting blockages. Surprise, surprise. And I was basically following their advice, but they said it was the scar tissue that was causing the problem, not necessarily what I was eating. So after a little while, it all settled down, and I was actually okay. I'll say okay, but I was better than I was. I wasn't having to rush to the toilet, which was amazing. I felt like it gave me my life back, in that I could go and socialize, I could do things and not have to worry too much. about that situation happening. So that was pretty good. Although I did still have the symptoms of Crohn's, the fatigue, and all the other things that go along with that. And then I was actually okay for a good few years. And at that time, after my operation, I was about 8 stone in weight, and I could fit my whole hand around the top of my arm. That's how bad I was. It's literally nothing on me whatsoever. But after this operation and things had settled down, I managed, after a couple of years, to get up to 13 stone. And I was going to the gym about 5 times a week, because when you've been that frail and skinny for such a long time, all you have in your mind is that you want to be big and strong, essentially. That's what I strive to do. I followed the stereotypical bodybuilding diet, high protein, some carbs, protein shakes, all that kind of stuff. And for the most part, it worked. I was looking pretty good. But I know they say that how you look on the outside is a reflection of how you are on the inside, or vice versa. But something behind the scenes was not quite right internally for me. But I was looking good and feeling okay, so I kind of just cracked on with what I was doing. And then one day, for some reason, I think it was on YouTube or I'd read an article or something, that carrots, for some reason, were really good for your overall health and bodybuilding and that sort of thing. And I didn't really know much about nutrition at the time, so I just thought, you know what, I'm going to incorporate carrots into my diet. So I remembered one thing they did say to me about when I had my ileostomy is peel your vegetables if you're going to eat vegetables. So got these carrots, peeled them, chopped them up, and then I ate them, I think, the day before I went to work, thoroughly chewed them. So then I woke up in the morning, went to the gym, went to work, and got halfway through the day, and I got this unfortunate pain, quite a lot of pain actually, and I noticed that my bag wasn't functioning. And I was like, oh no. And this suddenly hit me that it was probably the carrots. Unfortunately, I ended up in A&E with extreme pain. They put me on muscle relaxants and painkillers, and eventually it passed through. Needless to say, I never ate carrots again after that. So lesson learned. So then after that, I was fine. I just carried on eating what I was always eating: high carb, high protein, very low fat. And then 2022 came, and I got another blockage. But I hadn't changed anything in my diet, so I didn't really understand why. So I got another blockage. I ended up going into hospital again. This time, though, this was probably one of the worst ones because it couldn't come out my bag. So without being too crude, it came out the entrance point of my body, in which case they thought that my bowel had ruptured. So they were quite worried about it at that point. Luckily, that wasn't the case. It was just my body doing what it needed to do to get rid of what's going on. They did some scans and they said, look, we can't really see anything wrong other than a bit of bowel narrowing. I was like, well, that doesn't seem right, because I've been doing what I've been doing for a long, long time, and now I'm getting these issues. Why? I was thinking, what's happening? So to that, they put me on more drugs, lots of different ones. The one that sticks out most for me is I took a drug to inject myself into my legs and my stomach, which wasn't pleasant because if you hit a nerve, you knew about it. This was an autoimmune drug, like they all are, so it suppressed the immune system, which obviously would stop the symptoms, but not look at the cause. And it worked to a degree. And then after a short period of time, that stopped working again. And at this point, again, I was still looking okay. I mean, to look at me, you wouldn't think there was anything wrong with me, really. But I was suffering internally. So I had a word with my specialist team at the hospital, and they said, look, the only thing we can offer you, Greg, is a drug called infliximab, which was the drug from the very beginning that they wanted to put me on, the experimental one that contained the mouse DNA. He says, this is what we're going to have to do. I says, right, okay, well, that's allowed to do it. That's what I did. Basically, you go into the hospital, you sit in a semicircle with a load of other people, and then they hook you up to like an IV, and then you sit there for about an hour, and they come around and do your observations. They come around and give you cups of tea and biscuits and things like that. It's all very doom and gloom situation. Everyone's looking very sad, and you're just sort of sat there waiting. And then after the infusion, you have to sit there for a further half an hour to make sure you don't react badly to it and nothing untoward happens to you. Great. So this is what I did initially I had 4 of these things over a period of weeks. I wasn't getting any better, and I was in a lot of pain every day. The pain I was experiencing was like somebody jabbing me with something very, very sharp in my left side every day. And I was thinking, well, surely this drug should be working by now, because apparently it's very strong, and I think it's been used in cancer patients and things. So I rang my IBD team and I says, look, should I be experiencing, relief from symptoms at this point? And they said, oh no, you have to give it 6 weeks. 6 weeks is the time. I was like, right, okay. But in the meantime, after each injection, I was experiencing these strange side effects. So I was losing my vision, my balance was going. I just felt generally horrible. After each one, I had an average of 3 days off work because I was just nowhere. I just couldn't function. And I was just thinking, this doesn't seem very good. This doesn't seem right. So anyway, I went to 6 weeks, and 6 weeks came and passed, and I still felt the same, no change. So at that point as well, found out I was going to be a dad for the first time, which was incredible. So then, I was thinking, I need to do something. Something's got to change, because my partner is going to be looking after a baby, but looking after me, because I'm not, I can't function while I'm on this medication. So I didn't know what to do at that point, because I knew I couldn't carry on doing the drug that I was on. So I rang the hospital. I said, look, it's not working. I want to stop. He says, okay, that's fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. But what I will do is send you literature for 3 other drugs that we think that you might be better on. I was like, okay. And they said, at the same time, we'll get a dietitian to call you to discuss that side of things. I was like, okay, that's fine. So it was during this time that I started to do a bit of research myself, and I went onto YouTube and I saw a short video by Dr. Chafee, and he was talking about Crohn's disease and the fact that they use what's called carnivore lion diet for the treatment of Crohn's and autoimmune diseases. And this piqued my interest. I was like, what's this, and how can this be? And then from there, I kind of watched more of his videos, and I went down the rabbit hole, as you do. And I came across Dave Mack's videos, I came across your videos, I came across Keto Pro, Richard Smith's videos, and then the biggest eye-opener for me was Dr. Mark Kay. He opened my eyes to the scientific side of why this could potentially work. So I was thinking in my mind, I think I want to try this. I did. I jumped. Now, before I know now is that you're not supposed to jump straight in. But at the time, I didn't see that bit of information. So I thought, I'm going to try this. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, is that during my time of having the infusion at hospital, because I was struggling to digest food, I was blending all my food. So whatever it was, at the time it was high carbohydrate food, I was blending it in a blender and adding water to make it easier to get down. And that was every meal. And it seemed to help, allow it to pass through me. So I was doing that. So then when I found Carnivore, I thought, well, I'm going to have to do the same thing. I'm going to have to blend up my meat, and I'm going to have to and go down that route. So that's exactly what I did. So my first meal, Carnivore meal, was a steak with sausages, eggs and bacon that I put into a blender. I cooked it up, put it into a blender, and basically mushed it all together. And it didn't look great, to be honest. But when I ate it, it tasted amazing. It was like the best thing I've ever tasted in my life. It was beautiful. And I thought, yeah, this is good. I'm going to carry on doing this. So that's what I did. I was blending all my carnivore food to start with anyway. And then I did more research and found out that there's probably a good chance I didn't need to do that because meat digests really well, which I found out because then I started to eat solid forms of carnivore. I eat bacon and steak and things. And I was amazed that I could actually eat it and have no problems whatsoever. It was great. So the first thing I noticed was that my pain that I was having every day had gone away. And this was within a week. So the stabbing pain that I'd experienced had gone. And I was like, this is pretty amazing. After that, I noticed I wasn't getting bloated anymore. Prior to eating carbs every day, I'd get bloated and it wouldn't feel very, very good. You'd feel very lethargic and tired, after eating your lunch and your dinner. But on carnivore, there was none of that. I was like, this is weird. This is pretty cool, but it's weird. So I carried on doing that. And then I noticed that my energy levels increased quite drastically. When you have Crohn's, you're tired all the time. It's just one of those things you learn to live with. But I wasn't tired. It was kind of crazy, really, especially because at that point as well, through this carnivore, we'd had the birth of our son. And as you know, when you have a child, it's very tiring. And you're up all night, all hours of the night. I think the first few weeks we got very, very little sleep. But I was full of energy. And I was going to work and I was doing my job and the lads were looking at me and they're like, what are you doing? Because you just had a baby, you should be absolutely knackered. I was like, I don't know, I just feel great. So that was pretty interesting to see and very, very good actually. So anyway, I was feeling good and I noticed I started to lose some weight. So at the time I was 13 stone and that dropped quite drastically actually, roughly about 10 stone. So quite a drop. But I realized that it was water weight and probably some visceral fat because I maintained quite a lot of muscle. So that was, again, very interesting. And then since then, I managed to put a bit more on. So it sort of fluctuates between 10 and 10.5 stone, which I'm happy with. So that was good. And then whilst all this amazing stuff was happening to me, the hospital rang me back. My doctor rang me back from the hospital. And he said to me, right, Greg, so have you made a decision about what drug you want to take next? I says, well, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want to take any drugs. And he said, well, what do you mean? I says, well, I'm doing this thing called the carnivore diet and I'm feeling pretty amazing. I'm not in any pain. My bag, which I used to have to empty when I was on carbs, a good 10 times a day easily. I says, my bag, I'm emptying it twice a day. Didn't really have to, but I felt like I needed to. So about twice a day, I'd empty it. He says, all right. He says, are you sure? He says, I wouldn't advise you to do that. He says, you do know that there's no scientific evidence or proof behind the carnivore diet to say that this is going to work for you. I was like, no, I get that. He says, but also because you've got such an aggressive form of Crohn's, if it spreads to the area of your small bowel that absorbs nutrients, and we have to remove that, the likelihood of you having an early death is very high. Basically what he said to me is because if they remove that part of my bowel that absorbs the nutrients, there's not a lot more they can do because my body won't be able to absorb anything. He said, we can put you on a liquid diet for a while, but there's, unfortunately, Greg, that's where you could be headed. So essentially what he was saying is that if I didn't follow his advice and take the drugs, that I wouldn't be living very long if my Crohn's had spread. So at this point, it kind of really scared me because when you've got someone that you've listened to for 20 plus years telling you that if you don't follow their advice, you're going to be essentially 6 feet under in no time. I was quite taken aback by it, but then I thought, I feel good. No, I says, no, I want to do it. I says, I understand the risks, and I said, but I want to do it. And so he was quite annoyed with me, but he said to me, do you understand the ramifications of what you're saying? I said, I do. I accept what happens to me. He then changed his persona and he got kind of chirpier. I think because I'd said that whatever happens to me happens and it's my responsibility. So he said, okay, so what we'll do then, Greg, schedule you for an MRI scan in 6 months' time and we'll see how you're doing. And in the meantime, we're going to get the dietitian to ring you. She'll be ringing you any day. I was like, yeah, that's fine. I was quite happy with that, really, because an MRI should potentially show what isn't happening. So that's pretty good. So after that, I think it was a few days later, dietitian rang me. She says, "Oh, hi, Greg. How you doing?" She says, "Did you get the information I sent you?" Because she sent me some information about the low FODMAP diet. It was like 3 or 4 booklets that she sent me that made no sense whatsoever. It contradicted itself quite a lot. And I was just confused by it. But I was doing carnivore at that point anyway, so I didn't really read into it too much. I says, I got the literature. I says, but I'll tell you that I'm not following the advice that you sent me. She says, well, what are you doing? I says, well, to be honest, I'm feeling pretty good. My pain is gone. My energy levels are good. I says, I've lost some weight, but I'm maintaining muscle. She says, oh, that sounds pretty good. She says, what is it that you're doing? I says, it's called the carnivore diet. And she was like, is that like paleo? I says, well, it's similar. Paleo. I said, but all you do is you just eat meat. Eat meat and anything that's animal based. And you don't eat carbs, you don't eat fruit, you don't eat veg. And she was like, but what, you don't eat carbs? I says, no. I says, we don't need to, do we? Because, our body produces its own glucose through gluconeogenesis. And she says, oh no, but that's an emergency process that the body uses when you go into starvation mode. And I was like, that doesn't seem right from what I've learned from, Bart Kay and other doctors. But I humoured her and I says, all right. She says, you do know that you do need to eat carbohydrates and sugars because your brain needs it and various other organs need it. I says, yeah, I understand that. I says, but your body makes enough itself to be able to sort that out. But no, she wouldn't let it go. She basically kept on saying that I needed to take carbohydrates and needed to eat carbs. She even said to me, look, you don't have carbs. What's going to happen to you, Greg, is that you're going to get cranky, irritable, and all these hormonal changes, things are going to happen to me. And I was just like, I was nodding and smiling and nodding, essentially. Like, yeah, okay. So basically, the conversation came to a close with her saying to me that she feels I need to eat carbs and that I have to eat carbs. And I kept saying, no, I'm not going to eat carbs. And she said, look, I can't end this conversation with you, Greg, until you tell me that you will consider eating carbohydrates. I was like, right. She says, I'll consider eating carbohydrates. She says, right, well, that's all I needed to hear. She says, is there anything else you'd like to talk to me about? I was basically like, no, thank you. And then we ended the conversation. So she'd gone away thinking that I was going to consider doing it, and that made her happy. There you go. Of course, I never did eat carbs after that, and I still feel good.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. That's very concise. 25 minutes. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, Greg. I'm really pleased that you went through that so calm and relaxed about it. More energy is fantastic. Better skin, weight loss, which incidentally for the Americans, in Britain, we speak in stone rather than pounds.
We do, yeah.
It was 182 pounds down to about 147. So about 35-pound weight loss. But that's a side effect. As Greg very kindly pointed out, some of that would have been water weight. But I think the thing I find quite interesting is how, even though you said you were feeling great and things were better and you were reducing the amount of times you needed to use your bag, that just was almost ignored. Whereas clinical experience of the person is really vital. And this is what's frustrating, because you're not the only one that's got this story. As you mentioned in your email to me, it's very similar to Lee Copus' story, The Carnivore. your trips to the A&E, looking at all the advice online, eating carrots, those sort of things, then having a blockage, taking them out, having a blockage. And, the instant improvements with carnivore, and it's all completely poo-pooed by the, no pun intended, when we talk about colons, poo-pooed, but, it's completely ignored by the medical profession and dietitians. And this thing about having to eat carbohydrates just shows such a distinct lack of understanding of what they're even being taught, because the body does need carbohydrates, but it makes it. And it's demand driven. It's that simple. And when people fast, the hospital will tell you to fast, and yet you're not having carbohydrates then, but they think it's all right when it helps them. But that was brilliant. I mean, did you ever contact people like Mark Kay or Chafee?
I did actually, yes. So I saw that you had a live with Dr. Chafee on your channel, and I was at a point where I was questioning whether what I was doing was the right thing. Even though I felt great, there's still part of you that thinks, like, is this the right road to go down? Amazingly, I asked a question and it got answered, which was I never thought would happen. And I basically just asked, can Crohn's be stopped or even reversed on carnivore/lion diet? And he answered my question, and he basically said yes in a roundabout way. And I actually saved the recording of that video. So to keep me motivated, I'd watch it, and it would motivate me to carry on doing what I was doing. Because at this point as well, I'd transitioned from carnivore and I did full-on lion diet. Because I started to react to things like bacon and sausages. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to have to just go lion, which I did. And that's primarily what I've been doing. So yeah, it was great to hear from Dr. Chafee and you that yes, Crohn's can be stopped by this way of eating. So that was my mindset. My goal was to do that.
And you have achieved it, which is great. And you've also joined our school community, which, how are you finding that?
Yeah, really good. I probably ask too many questions, but every time I do ask a question, somebody always answers and you always get a reply. And it's really nice to be able to talk to other people, because the carnivore journey can be a lonely one, especially when everyone's telling you that what you're doing is nonsense and you shouldn't be doing it. My own mum was one of those people who was really concerned about what I was doing. So it's nice to be able to speak to people on a forum or, that sort of platform where they were doing the same sort of thing and going through similar things or things that you hadn't thought of. It was really good.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a link in the description for people interested in joining the school community. It's very inexpensive. I think it's the least expensive paid community in the school groups. Anyway, you mentioned your mum. Is she on board now?
So that's quite funny, actually. So my mum basically tried to disprove what I was doing. So she went online and did all the usual things, try and find information and things to disprove what I was doing, because she thought what I was doing was dangerous. And she couldn't find anything, really. So she thought to herself, the only way I can disprove Greg is if I do this diet myself and then become violently ill, essentially. So that's what she did. And we are now 12 months in and she's still a carnivore and she's loving life. So it backfired.
Well, it didn't in a way, because it's actually made her healthier, isn't it? But yes, I know what you mean.
She's seen some amazing changes.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So she's loving life right now and she's thanking me for getting her on it, to be honest.
Yeah, I might use that example going forward, if you don't mind, because I hear this all the time about friends and family saying how rubbish it is or it's dangerous, which is coming from a place of love. It's not coming from a place of anger. But I might say, put your opinions where your mouth is and do 30 days carnivore, because that's the way to try and disprove it, and it won't cause a problem, which is great. So, Greg, I want to thank you so much for giving me so much of your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Is there any final thoughts that you'd like to get off your chest?
Yeah, one thing I will quickly say is that I've had my MRI scan and I've had the results. So the results of that are that I have no active disease currently. So going on carnivore/lion diet has completely stopped the progression of my Crohn's disease, which I would never thought in a million years was possible, because all the drugs had never worked, and all it took was doing this to stop my Crohn's. And it's incredible, you know. But yeah, it seems crazy to a lot of people. But when you look into it and you start speaking to people like yourself, and you speak to other people in the space, you realize that it just makes sense, to live this way, and then I would say just try it, give it 30 days, and then you'll never look back. Definitely.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That is brilliant. Thank you so much. That's a perfect soundbite. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.